Hey, how's it going everyone? It's Lee Halliday, and in this video we are going to be working with KwesForms to add a form service to a Next.js application. Now you can use KwesForms with any sort of framework or type of website, be it server rendered or client-side rendered, Jamstack. It doesn't really matter, but it gives you an easy way to add a form, collect information without having to worry about anything to do with the backend. So you don't have to take care of deploying a database somewhere, handling spam, sending emails after you receive data through your form. So it's a really easy way to add a form and collect data to any sort of website. So I'm over here on my dashboard, and the way you get started with this is this big let's get started. Click to add a website. So we're going to be working just with we're going to build like a demo website where I'm collecting mentoring requests, somebody that wants to receive mentorship from me. So we're going to call it mentoring help, like I have here. And next thing it will ask you is what's the name of your form. So you can have multiple forms per website. We're going to call this mentoring request, we'll say, and we'll leave on enable spam filters. And the great thing about this, and sort of the funny thing about this demo, is I'm very much going to just be following the steps that KwesForms tells me to follow. Now there are a few differences because I'm adding this into a React app, and the great thing is that they've actually come out with an NPM package that you can install. So why don't we head on over to the code now, where I already have it installed. And I've committed at this point. So if anyone wants to follow along with me to add KwesForms to their own website, feel free. I'm going to link in the description to exactly where I'm at in this starting point. And I've already installed the packages that we need. And really there's just one additional package other than Next.js itself. And that would be the KwesForms package here. So we're going to be working in this one index page. And I've already imported the things that I need to get this up and running. So I'm importing KwesForms from KwesForms, and basically that's what they say to get up and running. And you call init when you're ready to sort of initialize this KwesForms script. As opposed to over here where you install the script, this is a bit tricky to do in Next.js because you have to embed it in the head and ensure that it doesn't get added more than one time. So NPM is definitely the way to go if you're working within any sort of JavaScript application. So when do we actually want to call init? Now you don't want to just put it here, KwesForms.init, because that would be called every single time your form, your component renders. So what you'd want to do is put this inside of a useEffect hook. So we'll do useEffect, and we'll use an empty array here. So no dependencies, basically run it once after the first render, and don't run it again unless this component unmounts and then remounts again. So with this done, we're set up and ready to move on to the next step. And what it tells me now is it's time to add a form to your page. So this is the page we're working with right now. It just says mentoring. So we're going to be adding a form here below. And the cool thing is we're just going to be copying and pasting from their fantastic examples. So we'll come down here and we'll add a form. Now you're going to have to reactify this. You can't just say class, you're going to have to say class name. And there's a few things that in their examples, they're sort of showing you the standard HTML example. And when you're in React and working with JSX, you're going to have to tweak that a little bit. One of the ways you tweak that is by the class name. So if we move on to the next step, we need to set up an action. Basically, when this form is submitted, where is it going to send the data to? Remember, this is a form service, so we don't have our own backend. We're sending all of the data to essentially KwesForms' backend, but they need to know that it's coming from your form and not someone else's. So that's what this key here is within the action. So we'll paste that in and on to the next step. So at this point, you're basically ready to start adding fields to your form. So I'm going to copy these ones, and then we'll put them inside of our form, just like this. And it's telling me I've got some invalid HTML. Well, it's not invalid HTML, it's invalid JSX. So we're going to have to tweak this a little bit. We have to make input self-closing, and you can't use the keyword for. You have to say HTML for. I think it's like that. Yep. And I'm just going to wrap these in a div because I already have a few styles set up to basically space these out. I'll quickly just show the styles I'm working with. Essentially, if there's a div directly inside of a form, add some padding. Here's how to style the input, the button. That's all I've added really. I just wanted to add the minimal so I don't have to add classes, but it will still look half decent. So at this point, you're essentially ready to start submitting data. And it gives me a little message, almost there, send your first submission to connect this domain. Because we're not done all of the steps yet. At this point, we could add validation rules or we could submit our first data. But why don't we go and build out the rest of this form before we start submitting some data and connecting our domain. So we've got name here. I want to add a validation to that. So let me validate that it's required, and then we'll validate the min length and the max length of the name we want. So if we go to their example, you'll see that they want you to add rules and then required and then a max length of 255. Now in React, I did run into a little bit of issues using some of these custom attributes that are being added, especially if you're working in TypeScript. It's going to tell you you can't use rules. That's not a valid attribute to add to an input tag. So what I found then the best way to sort of go forward inside of React is if we click into their documentation to validation. So typically they tell you, here's the HTML way to do it. Here's the W3C way of doing it. And essentially it's using data fields instead. And this is the way I actually recommend to do it within React because you won't run into any sort of TypeScript errors. So we'll add this in and we'll say that this is required, and you use pipe to have multiple validations. So we'll say that we want a min of 1 character or even 2 characters. You can't have a name that's just the letter, I guess. Maybe that is a valid name, I don't know, but up to you which validations you add. And then let's have a max of 255. And maybe just to show you the validation, I'll just save it like this. So when I go back to my form now, let's say I type just 1 letter, submit. It's going to validate and show the error that this field must be at least 2 characters. Or we can add a whole bunch, try to submit, and now it's going to limit it on the max side. And it is required. So it takes care of all the validations for you. You don't have to do anything else. Let's just say the max is 255 so people can have pretty long names. So I want to add a couple other fields to this form. I'm going to do one for email. So we'll change this type to email. The name will be email as well. And we'll say that it's a required, and there's a validation for email address that you can add in. They basically validate that it's a valid email address. Now HTML will also handle its own validations because of the type, but it can't hurt to have both. And one cool thing about KwesForms is that it does both client-side and server-side validation to stop users from being able to tamper with your HTML. So a user couldn't come in here and sort of right-click and remove the different requirements. As soon as the form is initialized, KwesForms sort of keeps track of all of the validations you want to run. And then as soon as you say enter a field, what it's actually doing, if I open up the network tab, if I could figure out how to do that. So hit save. See, it's actually sending a bunch of requests off to their backend, and it's validating input both on the client side, so you get the immediate user feedback, but it's also doing it server side so that nobody can tamper with your validations. So that's a pretty cool feature of KwesForms, that it's tamper proof. So we've got name, we've got email. Let's add a field for just a fun one. We'll call this your favorite number. So you might be saying I spelled favorite wrong. I did not. I'm in Canada, so that's how we spell it here. But anyways, HTML for, let's call this the fave. So this is just actually, we'll do a type number. You can still use the normal HTML input types. This is the fave. And we'll say that this is just a required field. So there's a whole bunch of other validations we could look into adding. They've got a big list of them here. So we could try to find one, maybe numeric is a good one to add. So the field under validation must be numeric. So we could pipe that in here, numeric. And now we've got our fave number. And I'm going to do one more field to grab the date that they would like to be mentored on whatever day. So we'll call this the date field. And we're going to give this a type of text. And we'll just put in date here. So they have a special input that looks really awesome for date fields. So if you go into form components, they have a date picker one. So we're going to click over to the W3C to see how this is added. And the way it works is you need an outer div to have a class of KW date picker wrapper. So in our case, we can actually add this class on this div here. Remember to swap it over to the Reactified attributes. And then we want to add this prop onto the input, just like this. So we'll do nothing else except make it a required field. And you want to keep it as text because basically KwesForms is going to take over and show a nice date picker as soon as they enter in there. So let me just refresh. So as soon as I click into this field, now it's sort of annoying that this autocomplete shows up. So why don't we just say autocomplete is off. Refresh. There we go. And now it doesn't do the autocomplete, but I can pick my date. So what I want to show now, we basically got a simple form up and running. I want to show how to add a custom validation onto this date field. So the way you do that is basically by using this KwesForms NPM module. And we'll actually go into the documentation so we can follow along. So if we go to form validation, basically if you've looked through the list of rules and they don't happen to have the one that meets your needs, you can add a custom validation rule. So if we go into the HTML and JS, what we want to do is this code here. So we say KwesForms.setCustomRule. And we'll do this in the same use effect, and we'll do it after initializing our form. Otherwise, it doesn't really know what form to, it might not know what form to add it to. So our custom rule, the first thing is the ID of the form. So we don't have one, so why don't we just say mentoring form so that we can say mentoring form here. The next argument is what field you want to attach this custom validation to. So we want to attach it to the date field. What message do you want to show? So what we're actually going to validate is that the date must be between Monday and Friday. I don't want any mentoring requests on the weekend. I want to chill after working all week. So we're going to say, please not on the weekend. And then the fourth argument is a function that is going to receive the value entered into the input field. And what we're going to do with this value in our case is we're going to basically convert it from a string as it arrives into an actual date. So we'll just say const date equals new date, and we'll pass in this value. It will get parsed out and put into a date. So we can say console.log date to just see that it's doing it correctly. So let me get my inspector open, console. Let's enter some date. And so here we have it consoling out Friday, October 2nd. So on date, there is a get day function that will give you what day of the week it is. So if we say, so why don't we just console that out, console.log date, get day, and let's figure out what Saturday and Sunday are. So let's pick a Saturday. Oops. The only thing I've noticed is sometimes because Next.js has hot module reloading, sometimes it gives you issues. There we go. So that's why I'm doing a little bit of refreshing. Hot module reloading can cause some issues. So this is 6. So Saturday is a 6, and I think Sunday, did I pick the 24th? No, Sunday. Yeah, see, I am getting some issues with this field. Sunday, there we go. I think it's when I have my my inspector open. But Sunday is a 0. So basically if it's 0 or 6, it's invalid because that means it's a weekend. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, and our job right now is to return true when it's invalid, so when there's an error. So we're going to return, and we're going to say it's invalid when it is equal to 0 or it is equal to 6. So that's basically our invalid dates. So we'll come back, we'll pick a Saturday. It says, please, not on the weekend. We pop it back to during the week, and it's all good again. So that's how you can add a custom validation. You can do anything you want. You could do sort of make sure it's in the future, the past. Favorite number, you could do, I only want even numbers, like keep those odd numbers out of my face. It's totally up to you, whatever you write in your custom validations. Another feature I wanted to show is over here in the form components, and it's called answer piping. And what this allows you to do is basically show an answer or a value that's been entered into the form somewhere else within the form as text. So the way you do that is by basically wrapping a span around any text that you want to show, and you give it this attribute data kw answer piped. So what we're going to do, and we'll do this down inside our fave number, is we'll just put another div here, and we'll say your fave number is, and then whatever. So our field here would be fields.fave, and then we come back, and now we're showing what the fave number is. Cannot read property fave of undefined. See that? What the heck? Cannot read fave of undefined fields. So it's got some issues here. 4. It's not liking that as soon as I step out of the field. Well, maybe there was some sort of running into an issue with required and validating as number. I'm not quite sure, but it seems to be working pretty well now. Could have also been an XJS hot reload thing. I'm not quite sure, but that's okay. One thing I want to avoid is when there's no value, I don't want to show it. So they provide another way to basically conditionally show data or not. So basically they give a data kw show or a data kw hide. So what we can do is basically on this div here, we can say data kw hide. And when are we going to hide? We're going to hide basically when fields.fave is an empty string. So you're sort of writing sort of like JavaScript, but as a string form inside of this attribute. And KwesForms is going to be actually running this code for you. So now when I come back here, you can see that it doesn't show up until I enter. Oh, I was typing the letter D and I was like, why isn't it showing up? It's because it's a number field, so it doesn't show any letters. So you can see here, it shows up and then it's hidden when it doesn't have a value. So I think we've done about all we can with this form. It's time to actually just submit some of this data. So we're going to fill this form out. Lee, we'll say my email address is my real one. My favorite number is, let's just say 42. And when do I want this mentorship? Again, the date got messed up because of hot reloading. This will not be a problem when you actually deploy it because there's no hot reloading out when it's in production. This is mostly just a development, a bit of an issue that you sometimes have to deal with. So our date will be, let's say on this Friday, and we're going to submit our form. So KwesForms detects that that was the first time you've submitted it. It says, great, now the final step. So we're going to set as either our live domain, and I don't want localhost as my live domain, so we'll say this is a test domain. Great, basically we're done. That's all there is to do. So we'll say go back to my form. Now it detects that we're in a test mode, which is cool. It tells you sort of what environment you're working in. And why don't we submit another piece of data? So we'll just say, Lee Testeroo, here's my email address, my fave number, when I want some mentorship, and we'll submit that. So it says, thank you for completing our form, and then it refreshes the page for additional input. You can fully control what happens after submission. So you can control whether it reloads or whether it redirects, no reload, whether you show a custom message. And all of these are done just by adding some simple attributes to your form. So it's pretty easy to customize. But if we head over to our dashboard, so if we just click View Submissions, now I can start to see that data that's coming in. So I submitted 2 different submissions. You can click in and you can see all of the details that were received with this submission. And one cool thing is if we click over to our form within our website, email settings, it automatically comes, then it sends an email to both me as sort of the owner of this form, and also a confirmation email to whoever the recipient was, so whatever email address they entered in. And you can go into any of these emails and modify what content they have, and it's just done with Markdown. These are the variables you can choose from. It's basically any of the variables that you've collected in your form, and you can modify what email is sent to you as a notification, and also what email is sent to the recipient. If you want one, you can always just delete that. So if I pop over into my email address and I refresh, so I've actually received 2 different emails. The first one being that I've received a notification there's a new submission, and the other one came to me because I was the person that submitted that data to this real email address. So at this point, we can deploy this website to production and start to receive mentoring requests, and we're basically good to go. So that's what I wanted to show today, how to take a KwesForms form, add it into, in this case, a Next.js React application, and start receiving data. And we did that in just about, say, 15 or 20 minutes. Can you imagine how long that would take if you had to deploy a Postgres server, deploy a backend to receive data, validate it, integrate with SendGrid to send emails after, and set up all of that stuff? Definitely would take you longer than 20 minutes to write all those custom validations. So this is the perfect tool when you need to add a quick form, and it gives you a lot of ability to customize it and validations and look and feel, etc. So check out KwesForms. It's a very cool service. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed this video. Take care. Bye.